Well, welcome back to the bulletin. We begin with our summaries, and Sandra has got the details.
Daryl, before we do the summaries, Happy World Toilet Day. How do you respond to that?
I don't know how to respond to that, but today is also International Men's Day. And I want
happy
to see,
World Men's Day.
Well, thank you very much.
You know how to respond to that one, not toilet. All right, to our summaries now. And management of Ideal Finance is debunking reports of a takeover by the central bank over liquidity challenges. We have this, plus many other stories in our summaries next.
A review of the local fuel market's performance in November's first pricing window saw an across-the-board reduction in prices at oil marketing companies, according to the Institute of Energy Security. Prices fell by 0.06 cedis per litre, dropping to 1.15%. As it stands, the average price of gasoline and gas oil remains at 5 cedis, 13 pesos, and 5 cedis, 15 pesos respectively. Binab, Cash Oil, Zen Petroleum, Pacific Oil, Alinco Oil, Frames Oil, Fraga Oil, and Lucky currently sell the lowest price fuel prices, and IES market scan shows. Brent crude prices plummeted more than 20% following the U.S. slapping sanctions against Iran earlier this month. At its peak in October, Brent crude stood at $86 per barrel, but toppled to below $70, a sharp decline. The management of Ideal Finance has debunked rumors of reports that the central bank is set to take over the financial institution over liquidity challenges. According to Ideal Finance, the report sourced from an interview with the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta on Peace FM on Friday was wrong. Following the collapse of 7 banks over the last 1 year, the finance sector has experienced a major shakeup. This has resulted in panic withdrawals with financial institutions, especially indigenous ones, being the hardest hit. Allaying the fears of customers, management said Ideal Finance Limited is in good standing with the Bank of Ghana with a paid-up capital of 56.7 million Ghana cedis. This is above the minimum capital requirement of 15 million Ghana cedis for finance houses with a capital adequacy ratio of 11.6%. Former Finance Minister Setekpe has rejected the current minister, Ken Ofori-Atta's description of the economy as inaccurate. According to him, the hand-to-mouth portrayal of Ghana's economy during the 2019 budget presentation last Thursday is more of a reference of the governing New Patriotic Party NPP style of administration. While presenting the 2019 budget statement to Parliament, Mr. Ofori-Atta justified his intention to lead the country to subscribe to the rare century bond in the coming year, stating that the ultra-long-term board is important to finance massive economic transformation plans next year. However, commenting on Newsfile, Mr. Tekpe said the NDC administration had a sound policy on debt, borrowing and investment, not one characterized by only revenue mobilization and spending, which explains the hand-to-mouth description.
All right, so those were our summaries for tonight. Quick trip around the world in the world of business. And Daryl, that tall building.
Yes,
the Tulip Tower, right?
It's just going to be a center of attraction and not really for any office use and all of that.
But that's a lot of revenue.
Yeah, that's a lot of revenue. Yeah. Great stuff. Well, let's bring you tonight's stories. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta says policy measures outlined in the 2019 budget would help position the country as an industrialized economy. He, however, identified revenue mobilization as his biggest challenge. George Rafael was at the PricewaterhouseCoopers Budget Forum and has the rest of the story.
The program brought together various players in the economy, business leaders and regulators to review the budget. In his address, the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta said the budget has the right policies that would help grow the economy.
The issue of having a sense of stability and therefore filling quite a bit of the holes, there's still some to go, is now to propel ourselves forward and test, our mettle as a republic. This year's budget is essentially expected to lay down the pillars and foundations needed to build what we call a 1,000-year economy of peace and prosperity, infrastructure being a key priority, and industrialization to make sure that we have a thriving, creative economy.
He also talked about the fact that the biggest fears are issues with meeting the review targets.
A big challenge for us is going to be what we do with GRA and the ports as a signal to how serious we are, and what we do with prosecutions going forward. So we will be working very, very actively with the Auditor General and the Special Prosecutor. We have 10,000 NADCO people who are joining the GRA revenue force.
Country partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Vish Ashiagbo, has also described the budget as a document that would aid growth of businesses.
In terms of learning our lessons and where we need to go, I think it's clear. You see from the issues around stability, macroeconomic stability, and the need to maintain that. For me, that's the primary thing, because we've seen that there's a continued emphasis on that. You see that the budget foresees a little bit more expenditure than in previous years. That is why the deficit is going to widen just a little bit, but certainly still within the 5% ceiling that we're working towards. So all in all, I think the budget does touch on the key things or where we have to learn lessons, just as you said.
President of Ghana Bankers Association, Al-Hassan and Dani, noted that it's critical for government to put in place measures that would help bring about some fiscal discipline because of its impact on the banking sector.
All of that should be looked at in the context of what government aims to achieve in terms of the fiscal deficit after doing everything that they've said they will do. If they're able to keep that fiscal deficit at the 5% mark, at the 5% mark, then we're not going to be accumulating that volume of debt. We're not going to be increasing the level of the appetite to borrow and raising that interest rate.
However, for some participants at the program, even though they welcome some initiatives in the budget to boost revenue, they still think they are being overtaxed.
Well, today also happens to be African Statistics Day, and to mark the day, Board Chairman of the Ghana Statistical Service, Dr. Grace Bediako, is calling on both public and private sectors to make good use of data provided by the Statistical Service in their daily operations. She says proper use of data is one of the surest ways of attaining the Sustainable Development Goals.
Africa celebrates the African Statistics Day every year on November 18 to raise public awareness on the importance of statistics in all aspects of the continent's socio-economic and life. The theme for this year's event is high-quality official statistics to ensure transparency, good governance and inclusive development. According to the former government statistician, Dr. Grace Bediako, the importance of data in national development cannot be underrated.
We must begin with data and be guided all the way to the end of the period assigned, that's 2030, by data. We are to leave no one behind and tackle those furthest away first. We can only do this effectively if we have the requisite data, relevant, timely, reliable, and appropriately disaggregated.
The program was also used to launch the platform for reporting on the Sustainable Development Goals and how Ghana is performing. Minister for Planning, Professor Jan Balfour, launching the platform, called on all data collection agencies in the country to align their models with the current trend of the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, you will all agree with me that the post-2015 agenda provides an unprecedented context for a collective push to address developmental challenges. With the increasing demand for more and better quality data, current global, regional, and national development frameworks require a step change in the types, in the methods, in the actors, and the investments in data production and utilization in the country.
Citizens will have the opportunity to monitor the performance of the country on all the 17 Sustainable Developmental Goals. Eben Sabute's report for Joy Business.
In other news tonight, foreign investor Caitlin is set to take over Alwix Limited. To this effect, the board has begun the process of issuing shares to the new investor. According to management, this development presents a bright future for the company, considering Caitlin's track record in the aluminum industry. Managing Director of Alwix Limited, Ernest Okon, was addressing the media on the sidelines of the company's annual general meeting. In Accra, Bismarck Awusa has more.
In 2017, the Board of Directors of Alwix, at its annual general meeting, stressed the need for a strategic investor. At the end of the third quarter of this year, the firm says it is close to concluding the transaction with a foreign company. Earlier, it received a formal request from an international aluminum manufacturing company, Caitlin Limited, to become a majority shareholder. According to the Managing Director of Alwix Limited, Ernest Okon, the process would include the issuance of new shares to Caitlin, which will then be listed on the Ghana Stock Exchange.
We've had several discussions with Ghana Stock Exchange. They are very well aware of what we've told you today at the annual general meeting, and they are very confident that as soon as the investor comes in, everything is hunky-dory. So we are not worried about it at all, because we know that we are getting out of the ruts very soon. Next year, by this time, or by the end of the year, the face of the company will have changed. There'll be these new people in place. As we told you, the people we're talking to are in the aluminum industry worldwide.
Meanwhile, Alwix has threatened to increase the price of its products next year if government does not apply measures to curb the influx of Chinese aluminum products.
At the same prices produced in China, they have to transport it all the way to Ghana, pay duty, clear the goods, and yet it ends up cheap in Ghana. The only way that's happening is that the government in China gives them an export rebate. And therefore, they're able to sell, it's cheap here. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to sell at all. But it is hurting us because it is not just cheap, it is very cheap. Now that we're going to be turning around and becoming a much stronger company, we're going to be pushing hard on the JITC's doors for them to set up what are called countervailing measures, which is a recommendation from the WTO. It simply says, if in China they give an export rebate of, let's say, 30%, we will add 30% duty here. Then we'll level the playing field. Then everything will be fair again.
Alwix recorded a deficit on its income surplus account, a situation that has caused the inability of the directors to pay dividends to shareholders. Bismarck Awusa, Joy Business.
All right, you're watching Business Live. We are taking a short break. We have more news on the other side.
Thanks for your time. You're still watching Business Live. Now, today is World Toilet Day. Over the years, one of the biggest headaches for governments has to do with access to public places of convenience. And as Ghana joins the rest of the world to mark this World Toilet Day, open defecation is one of the biggest issues for us. And our man who has been on the ground today assessing the issue is Charles Aite, and he joins me now in the studio. Thanks so much for joining me, Charles.
Hello.
So what was the findings today on the ground when you stepped out?
Well, it's a mixture of both good news and bad news.
Right.
The good news was that we currently do have private individuals expressing interest in investing in, issues of public, places of convenience. The bad news is that if you used to be visiting public places of convenience, you'd have to now pay more.
Why?
To just go ease yourself out.
Why? Why is it so?
Well, initially, based on the interactions that I had with the attendants there, it's got to do with the fact that, previously we had this pit latrines,
right,
which of course did not meet the UN standards, but now they're now moving on to the WCs, the water closets. So the prices have shot up.
Because water is included.
Water is included.
You need tissue as well.
You need tissue as well. Sanitation is very much key, but upon visiting most of these public toilets, I can say that 4 out of 5 of these public toilets were marginally decent.
Right.
But 5 out of 5 were very much expensive.
So how much was it and how much are they paying now?
Well, initially it was 10 pesos per the point in
that's
time
the latrine that we know,
visit.
not the WCs that we are
No,
currently
that's the public place of convenience,
okay.
the public toilet, as we often do term it.
Okay.
Initially was
the KVIP.
The KVIP
okay.
was 10 pesos, but as we're discussing now, it's been moved to 50 pesos.
That's about how many percent?
Over 400.
How much? That's
over
a lot.
400%.
So you've been speaking to some people.
I've been speaking to some, and I managed to just put something little together.
All right, so let's go for that report. We'll come back for the discussion.
Imagine a public toilet like this one across the country, the kind of public toilets that each and every person would have to not just ease themselves in the very cold comforts of their own privacy, but of course have a very decent place for them to even have themselves wash up their hands. As we follow the world to mark the World Toilets Day, we're asking various questions related to sanitation. I put most of these issues to the head of this beautiful luxury public toilet system, and he's been answering for us the best ways by which we could get there and how best the private sector could rake in the investment opportunities that has to do with the hanging nature of Ghana's public toilet systems.
I don't know. It's a sad story, because you ask yourself, how did we get here? How did we lose it? Because we've been there before, where other African countries were looking at us. So why now? Where did we go wrong? You see, and I think it's about not striving for excellence.
First, in there, 30 pesos. And Saturday, we are flashing. And says, I am a flashing toilet in 50 pesos. Because I had them for 24 hours. A day, getting me 30 pesos. And then I'm a doka, which now about the sister. A day, marketing here at me for. That marketing and so at me be at 38 and 42 bisa. 426. It means sir.
And the idea market near when you 426.
Says I am Kasaya 4.
All right, Charles, that looks like a very posh toilet. Looks like it's from a hotel. Is that the case?
Yeah, a little. That's not a hotel. That's toilet on wheels. On wheels, and
right.
That's by a company called Posh Pots. That's Posh Pots, and what they do is that they move from one event to the other. If you want that for your home, we have no issues about that. And the boss, of which we did speak to, is kind of adopted the UK model, the British model, to come up with this entire intelligence, thing that he's coming up with. So this is the private sector. So if I have
an event, I can contact them and then they give me.
Just contact them. They just come over with a truck. It looks
really neat and decent, right?
Yeah, it looks very neat. You think it's a hotel, as you just rightly stated, but it's on wheels. It moves from one place to the other. But the main reason why I decided to put these two pieces together was to give a little bit of a contrast, because you get to see the private, investor, how they're coming up with this whole thing.
Do we know how much that costs? Well. The one on wheels. Do we know how much?
It's relatively expensive. So he's talking about 1,500
for an event. For how many hours?
For the entire day.
For the entire day. And so we move now to the typical public toilet that we know. And she was saying something about prices. Can you explain what she said?
So based on what she said, in three of which we're going to be having the translations. The amount of money they make a day, if there's no sale at all, is 480 Ghana cedis. 480 Ghana cedis. That's quite a lot.
Yeah.
And if they're making real sales, we're looking at between 500 to 600 cedis each and every day. So just imagine the amount of money she makes in a month or even in a year, and the amount of people that visit that particular facility each and every day. So it's a whole ball game. We're missing out on an investment in the country.
I was coming to that. I was talking about, we're having this whole conversation because we want to change the face of public places of convenience.
Sure.
So what role do you think, or judging for what you saw on the ground today, the role of the private sector and ensuring that we have decent places of convenience?
Well, unfortunately, based on the interactions that I've had with some of them, like the gentleman from Posh Sports, they are not really being roped into the entire, value chain.
If they say roping, what do they really want?
Government is not actually engaging them because they have the mindset, they have the capital, they have the innovation to make sure that it's much more, nice, it's much more, sanitation-wise, it's much more decent. But government isn't. Government is taking all the burden on itself. And unfortunately, to issues of maintenance culture in the public sector and the public, places of convenience as well. So the private sector is very much prepared to step into the investment drive in this arena. But unfortunately, we're not having government.
Yes, if they say they are prepared, what are some of the ways they want government to engage them? Is it that they want to contract them so that they can build such facilities for private homes, or what exactly were they looking forward to?
Interacting with this gentleman from Posh Ports, for instance, he wants a special capital for such people. We're talking of exemption of taxes and everything, and we're also talking of specific amounts of packages for them and places that they could establish their businesses in that regard. And we could have many of these beautiful things, but it all boils down to maintenance culture. It boils down to what you and I do whenever we visit these places to make sure that they are always in the best of places.
All right, Charles, I mentioned, I asked Darryl, happy public toilet day. What's the response?
I have no response.
All right, so on that note, we wrap up tonight. Live. For more news, do log on to myjoyland.com/business for business updates. I've been doing this with Darryl Kwao. Thanks so much for making a date with us. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Good evening.